Hey everyone, it's Justine from It's Just Paper, and I'm so excited to be a part of this year's Advent calendar. Let's open up today's box and make something pretty. All right, let's begin by unpacking. Today is day 16, and we are getting something really cool that is super versatile that you could use to embellish really any card or create a card out of these. And these are these little dies here. So butterflies, some flowers, some leaves, the things that really you can put on any card for any occasion, or at least the majority of occasions anyway. So I'm going to start off by just grabbing a whole bunch of ink pads. I'm using a bunch of shades of pink here from dark, medium, light, and I'm just smushing them onto my glass mat. Something like an oven mat works too, just a non-porous surface, so not paper. Because what we want to do is we want to use these like watercolors. In order to get the inks moving, we're just going to spritz them with some water. Any spray bottle is fine. And we're going to grab a piece of paper. You can use standard paper for this, or watercolor paper. There's really not a ton of liquid here going on, so regular paper will work as well. But I'm using some Tim Holtz watercolor paper. It's my favorite because it's got such a stark white compared to the majority of watercolor papers out there that usually are more of a creamy color. And I'm just going through this and just picking up the ink. You're never gonna get the same panel as me or the same panel twice, no matter how hard you try when doing this technique, but it is really pretty and an easy way of doing watercolor. I'm really happy that I ended up going and adding like an apricot sort of color, an orangey yellow. I think it helped to contrast the pink a little bit. So this is what it looks like officially. I'm now gonna grab a gold watercolor palette here, and I'm just gonna spritz some water to activate the colors here because they're dry at the moment. And I'm gonna use a paintbrush. Doesn't matter if it's wet or dry at this point. I'm gonna pick up some of that color and then I'm gonna hit the paintbrush in order to create a splatter. And this is just gonna add some more dimension to the card and a little bit of shine and shimmer. I'm going to use this white gold color and then some of the darker gold colors. I'm just going to experiment because these are going to be cut up into little die cuts. Don't worry about doing anything fancy or whether you're doing it right. Just add some splatters and you're all good to go. So you can see when I hold it up to the light, you'll see the glimmer that you kind of get from those. They're really pretty. It's a great tool to have in your stash, some gold watercolors to add things like spritzes and splatters. I'm going to now just place the die cuts all over the panel here, and I'm going to die cut these. I am trying to get some of the white in there as well, again adding some contrast and some interest and some dimension to the card itself. And I'm going to cut these out at least twice, so I have a bunch of shapes that I can work with just in case I need a few extras, and then any leftovers I can just simply store with the dies once I store it in a pocket. I did decide to add some sort of turquoise green colors here just for the leaves, and the leftover half of the watercolor paper that I am not going to end up using, I'm just going to use the back of it here to pick it up. And you can see I've added more water here than I did on the pink. The pink was a little bit more dry. This has a lot more water, and you'll see that it looks a lot more like a watercolor look, and when I hold it up and down, you'll see that the drips of the watercolor occur a little bit differently than the pink. So I'm going to run the dies through, the same dies. I'm just going to run the full set through the pink twice. I'm going to run the full set through the green, just so I have a nice variety of shapes, like I said before, to work with. In the meantime, I'm going to set those off to the side. I'm going to cut myself a piece of patterned paper. I used a wood grain panel because I figure most have something like this in their stash. This is a really old paper pack. It's still available though from my Christmas collection called Christmas Village, and it's got this and a brown one as well that are really pretty to use on cards. And I am going to use an arch die here just to give myself some sort of frame to work with. If you have any nesting dies, be it a rectangle, square, circle, diamond, anything like that, grab any shape for this card. And if you don't have anything, just cut yourself a rectangle. It's totally fine. It just gives you a little bit of a place to work and a place to add the elements to. And you'll see what I mean when I start putting everything together. All right, I'm going to go through some of the tips I have when I'm arranging things on my cards. Usually, I will arrange things before I glue, just to make sure I'm happy. In this case, I'm just adding the two very large die cuts, and then I'm working from largest to smallest. I decided the one flower, the really largest flower, I'm not going to add. It takes away too much from the butterflies. And I'm just trying to create a contrast of colors here, greens and pinks together. And I'm working along the shape of the frame. So this kind of gives me a little bit of a guideline as to where to put things. Other tips that I can give here are to, balance of color, like I was saying before. Sometimes working with an odd amount of elements is very helpful as well. In this case, because we're adding so many things here, it really doesn't matter if it's an even or an odd number. But if you're ever working with very few shapes, an odd number looks more appealing to the eye. And this is one of my things that I kind of my go-tos, whether it's a circle, a diamond, a square. I kind of just go along the edge of it on 2 or 3 sides, and I just kind of create these little clusters, and I think they look really great on cards. And this card looks like it took forever to do, but really at the end of the day, I sloshed some paper through some ink, die cut it, and glued. It really is a simple card to do. The only thing that can be a little bit more difficult is trying to find a sentiment. You could, of course, cut any sentiment or stamp any sentiment onto a white sheet of cardstock and just trim it out. That's totally fine. But if you did want it on your card itself, it could be a little bit more of a challenge. And it's also okay, I wanted to show you this, to change your mind. So I stamped this happy birthday thinking this would work really well. It's actually too big for this card. So I'm trying to arrange it. I tried with a rectangle. I went in and fussy cut it to see if that would look any better on the card. It really didn't. So I had to change plans. I decided instead it would either need a very thin strip of a sentiment with fine print, or I would need to find a place where I could stamp it in that left part of the archway that really doesn't have anything. So this is where I decided to put the sentiment, and I stamped it several times because the ink that I chose is the super, super pale ink, and obviously I want to be able to see the sentiment. A darker color probably would have been easier. So I just stamp and stamp until I'm kind of happy, and the stamp really works perfectly. This was from another one of the stamp sets from the Advent calendar. I glued this here to my card panel. I already have dimension on the arch where I added some foam tape, so I'm not going to add any more foam tape to this. And then the card is done unless you want to add a couple of embellishments. I hope you're inspired to create with your dies. Give this watercolor try a look. Tag CraftStash. We would love to see what you're creating over on Instagram or the Facebook group.